So on this side, let's take a look at tomato. So these are the double leader tomatoes. I'll come over to this one here. You can see they have 2 strings up to the wire, and each string has been clipped to one of the main growing stems. The main stem is this one where my left hand is showing you. And you know that by the first flower cluster, which is these guys, form, and below that, anything is considered a sucker. So if you're pruning to 1 leader, you remove this sucker. If you're pruning to 2, the first sucker becomes your second leader. So that's why that one's clipped. And if there was anything below, we would remove those. You can see here, it's already been removed at the node, removed. And so we're good on down the line there. Eventually at the bottom, the leaves start turning a little yellow, purple dying, and that's all right. Oh, here's one way at the bottom. This sucker here, right at the surface. Those not only are suckers, but they can easily get diseased since they're right in contact with the soil. So we're trying to avoid that. All right, so it's clipped in, and then we're doing basically the same thing as the cukes from there. We're just winding each stem individually. With 2, you got to be a little bit more careful. There's more pieces at play, but the concept is the same. You just wind up that main stem, and you want to be careful, just again like the cucumber, not to choke the fruit. That's the important stuff that we're doing this for. And you want to also make sure not to twine in your other piece of string. All right, here we go. Now that's separated, we'll do it again. We go around there, I'm going underneath the fruit cluster here, underneath the node, and we're about up to the top. On number 2 here, there's not so much growth yet, so it's just, we'll do a single rotation around, move up 1 node, and that's all we got there on the second leader so far. So that's the basic concept on double leader pruning. Again, this is the first sucker, which is our second leader, and this, the main growing stem, our first head, our first leader. And if we come around to the other side of this plant, you can see we got flowers coming up. And another thing you can do is called cluster pruning. So you can see this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 flowers on there. And with these greenhouse tomatoes, I want to get pretty large ones pretty quick. So a lower number of flowers will mean more mature fruit faster and bigger fruit. So I'm going to take off a couple of these smaller flowers here and just leave a total of 5 fruit for this cluster. And then up here, you can see right now there's only 4, so I'm going to leave that just as is. And I would go down the line doing the exact same thing for all these guys. As they get bigger and bigger, they keep growing up and up, and eventually they'll get up to the wire here, and that is when we do what's called lower and lean them. They are on these spools of twine, and by pressing that button, you loosen it up and you can pull out the twine that will lower the plant down onto the surface. So the stem will curve down on the surface where you remove some leaves at the bottom, and that will keep the fruit at an easy to harvest height, as well as allow the plant to continue to keep growing up. And this is of course only the plan with indeterminate varieties. With determinate varieties, there's nothing to worry about. They bush out at a certain point, they stop growing, and that's all the fruit you're going to get. But with these guys, they continue to put on growth throughout the season. So these greenhouse tomatoes, hoop house tomatoes, they went in mid-April. We've got some small fruit on there now. It'll probably ripen up by the end of June. And then we'll be picking off these for July, August, September, until October. And we remove these as our cool season stuff goes back in the veg house. So tomato, there's a lot of work, but they can be really profitable, especially in this high value covered space. because they put on fruit so quickly, you can harvest off of them for so long, and they're just the top most popular thing that customers are looking for. Farmers markets, CSAs, you know, the world gets significantly better in the summer when there's ripe tomatoes. So how about a single leader plant? Over here you can see these guys are a bit bigger. It just has one main growing stem here, and it's the same story. It's clipped at the bottom, clipped at the base. Oh, there's a sucker down below. I'm gonna snap that out. You can see these other wounds where I've pinched out the suckers so far. So with the single leader pruning, with single leader pruning, you want to remove all the suckers below the first fruit cluster. So on this cluster, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 flowers. So I'm just going to snap that all out. And now I've got 2, 4, 6. Usually I want about 5, so I'm going to actually remove this one also. And then that's what we got here. All right, you can see there's more flowers here. There's a new cluster coming up right there. These are starting to grow pretty quickly. So you want to give it some support. So you just take your clipped line and you wind it around. You got to be careful with these larger lower leaves not to snap them. And you have to be careful as well not to make your lines so tight that it puts pressure on the stem of the plant, sort of like girdling a tree. If you wind too tightly, you can girdle the stem on these tomato plants, which we definitely want to avoid. So here you can see my line's getting a little bit taut, so I might need to release a little bit to keep going, but it's going to be very strong support here. And because we're not too tall yet,